Hello, and welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history. So, how's it going? What have you been up to?
I baked donuts. I've been looking for a way to make donuts for ages that doesn't require frying or buying special molds.
I was going to say, you baked donuts?
Yeah, if you get the consistency, it's basically kind of somewhere between a cookie dough and a cake batter. And if you get it just right, you can pipe it out. Sorry, I'm going to do that again without almost choking. You can pipe it out and just bake it, and yeah, you get donuts. Like, I
That's
want to
amazing.
experiment with trying to make churros because it's the same batter for a donut as for a churro.
Uh-huh.
And I love churros. Can't buy them anywhere.
Oh man, yeah. It's normally like the only place you can get them in the UK is like those market stalls where they have a big fryer and they do it. Unless you go to a restaurant, I guess.
Yeah, like, but problem is when I did work experience in Spain, there was this one cafe that was open during the siesta. And me and this other person, because there was a whole group of us, we'd go to that cafe and get churros and hot chocolate during the siesta.
Oh
And
my
it was
god.
great.
Oh my god.
And now it's really hot and I'm tired all the time, so I want churros.
Oh, that sounds like the best way to deal with extreme heat. I'm so glad we had rain down here a lot last week, which is great because everything was starting to go yellow.
Yeah, we had not had rain for 2 or 3 weeks. And then right before recording this, we had a half-hour thunderstorm.
Mm.
And, like, thunderstorms are my favorite weather anyway. But after 3 weeks of, like, 24 degrees, 60, 70, 80% humidity, I needed this. I can breathe now.
Yeah, that's too much humidity. That's not acceptable. Not acceptable to my wimpy English complexion.
Manchester's just a very humid place. The air is made of water.
Yeah, I remember that. Manchester has a weird kind of microclimate where it doesn't snow, but it rains a lot.
Yeah, like, I don't think I've lived somewhere that snow really happens since I was a little kid. Because, like, when I was a little kid, we lived in Northumberland, there was snow. And then I lived on the Cheshire Plain where there's just barely any precipitation, full stop. And then I lived in York where it just doesn't snow.
Just,
Like,
there was, like,
every
one
weather happens
time,
in York except good, decent snow.
despite it being in the north.
And now
I felt kind of cheated by
I live
that.
in Manchester.
The only place I've lived where it actually snowed was at Vienna, but I didn't live in Vienna. I lived, like, on the outskirts in a school in the middle of a forest.
I'm sure it was very pretty.
It was, yeah, the snow was amazing, and this forest was just, like, magical in the snow, and the snow was, like, proper, like, up to your calves snow. We still didn't get off work because schools in Austria never close.
So, have you been making anything?
Um, yeah,
You
I
sound really unsure.
yeah, it's kind of slowed down a little bit in that I've been doing a lot of cooking. I made gooseberry falls the other day.
Oh.
It was great. So good. And normally gooseberry's a bit tart for me, but cream and a bit of sugar, like, it was great. So yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of cooking, which is very creative, but I guess not so tangible once you've eaten it. I did recently start making I'm catching up with my sewing and stuff that's been not happening for a long time. So I finished that dress, which I spoke about, I think, in the last episode, and I've
You
started
did.
making a pair of shorts. So I'm in need of those, and I've got this fabric, which is a printed cotton with little otters on it, and it's adorable. So I'm gonna have otter
Amazing.
shorts. I'm so excited. That's
So
about
this is an episode whose number is divisible by 5. And
it.
so rather that's how it is. It's the 5th episode. Um, so I believe you've been researching a biography episode for us.
I have indeed, and I'm so excited about this. I was sort of finishing off the research this afternoon, and there are just so many things. I mean, I'm gonna try not to read out the entirety of this book I was using to there will be a significant amount of it. So today we are going to talk about Alexandre Dumas. Now you might be thinking, what does he have to do with food? He is famously famously the author of The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo, two of the most famous pieces of French literature ever. Both of which I have half read and then given up because they were so long. But I was enjoying it. I just sort of got distracted at some point, so I have to go back and do that at some point. But yeah, one of the most famous French writers ever. Um, and he actually has quite a lot to do with food, as you will find out, because so it turns out Alexandre Dumas actually does have quite a lot to do with food, because he wrote this massive recipe encyclopedia called the Grand Dictionnaire de Cuisine, published in 1873, which is just this kind of absolutely wild collection of recipes, history about dishes and ingredients, information, and just anecdotes, stuff that has happened to Dumas and observations. And it's honestly like I love it.
Oh no, was he a recipe blogger?
He was essentially a 19th century recipe blogger. I think that is a valid comparison here. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of background about Dumas, actually, because I think it is also relevant. And I'm going to start with this because it's a fact that I think has become more well known recently, but it's still quite easy to assume otherwise. So Dumas was black, in case you didn't know. I think you probably didn't know, but a lot of people don't know. I didn't know until a few years ago, I think, when
I learned from Tumblr like 3 years ago. So.
yeah, I think I also had the Tumblr education. Alexandre Dumas was the son of a guy called Thomas Alexandre Dumas, which is a fantastic name for a man who had possibly one of the most interesting lives I have ever come across. His dad, Thomas, was born in Haiti to a French nobleman and a slave by the name of Marie Suzette Dumas. They had 4 kids together, and I assume they were together for quite a while, but there's no evidence that they ever got married. And this is not any kind of a romantic story because, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but I think it's important to include as well, to fund his trip back to France, the nobleman, who was a marquis, sold all of his children and Marie into slavery. Um, he later bought back Thomas, who was apparently his favourite son. But Thomas, I think, quite
That doesn't
understandably,
make it okay.
I know, yeah, and I think it's pretty understandable that Thomas chose to take his mother's name, Dumas, instead of his father's,
Yeah,
which
'cause it rhymes.
Which Alexandre Dumas also did. So yeah, um, However, Alexandre Dumas went on to become a very high-ranking French military officer in the army of Napoleon. And I think he was a general, and he had this amazing career. Although he later
Sorry, what's a literary officer?
military officer, sorry,
Oh,
need
okay.
to enunciate.
It's probably just cutting out.
Yeah, so he became pretty well known in France, I think, as well. Um, Though he later died not so well off after a spell in prison in Italy. I mean, his life is just like amazing story. Apparently, The Count of Monte Cristo was partly based on life of Alexandre Dumas' father. And there is apparently a really good biography of him called The Black Count. I can't remember who the author is, but I will put a link to that on the Twitter. And hopefully I will get to read that at some point because it sounds super interesting. So Alexandre Dumas, as previously mentioned, became one of the most famous writers in France during his time as well. And although as he got really successful, he also got a lot of critics who are quite racist towards him, as you might expect.
What?
But Alexandre Dumas also had this extremely sharp wit, and he would just have amazing comebacks. So yeah, I definitely recommend look at that as well because he just absolutely destroyed people who criticized him as well. So back to the food history element. He wrote this gigantic recipe encyclopedia because he was a lifelong food enthusiast and like foodie as well. And he really enjoyed like eating different things, but also cooking. He was apparently a really good cook. And so he put together this big dictionary thing. And so I have not this massive dictionary, but I do have a copy of some excerpts from it, which is From Absinthe to Zest, an alphabet for food lovers, published by Penguin. So I'm going to sort of through that a little bit and maybe read you some excerpts because it's it's a bit of a wild ride, to be honest.
Okay.
As I said, it's full of all this history as well, some of it a bit dubious about these recipes and ingredients. It is an alphabet, so it starts at absinthe. Also very famous in popular culture. Apparently absinthe was originally a tonic for the stomach. If you don't know, absinthe is made out of the wormwood plant. It's a very, very bitter, extremely alcoholic spirit.
And also a hallucinogen.
Yeah, which is what it's famous for lots of the French poets.
Yeah, I believe it was known as the Green Fairy.
Yeah. In fact, Dumas writes that some of our Bohemian poets have called absinthe the Green Muse. Others not in this group have died from the poisonous embraces of this same muse. And in fact, he notes that about the passion, about the particular poet Alfred Dumas. My French pronunciation is not great. Notes a particular episode in which Alfred Dumas misses the classes that he teaches at an academy in Paris because he is just drinking so much absinthe. He's having a massive trip, basically.
Excellent.
And Dumas notes that somebody makes a comment about this. Do you not find that Alfred de Musset is absent a little too frequently? And the reply was, "You mean to say that he absents himself too much?"
Oh, that's like one that I would say, and that means it's
Yeah.
bad.
I think you have the same sense of humor as Dumas. So that one's fantastic. He also has a section on cake, um, in which he talks about English wedding cake. So he notes that the practice in England, as we can read in the works of Dickens, is to make an enormous cake on the occasion of the wedding of one's offspring and to distribute a slice of this to each guest, which we still do. So it's cool to get a mention of that in historical sources.
Yeah.
He mentions the cake is made using kilos of flour, 2 kilos of butter, of sugar, 7 grams of nutmeg, 8 eggs for each pound of flour, um, sweet almonds, candied lemon peel, raisins, candied orange peel, and half a litre of brandy.
I'm gonna go ahead and assume that wasn't the average wedding cake.
That sounds quite large.
And quite
Um,
eggy.
yeah, for a
That's
big
a lot of
wedding.
egg.
I mean, yeah, it does sound a bit like the traditional English wedding cake, though, being full of alcohol and fruit, basically.
Mm.
All of those things that are expensive and you have at a wedding, or you did.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So,
it's not what I had at my wedding, but that's largely because I don't like fruitcake.
yeah, I mean, yours was much more delicious than fruit cake. Yeah, I think the only merit of fruit cake at the time when it was popular was that it was expensive ingredients, but
Mm.
and also lasted forever. In fact, there used to be a tradition in the British Isles that you would use save a piece of the wedding cake and use it for the first child's christening.
No.
Oh, yes.
No.
Um, that one doesn't happen anymore, except maybe symbolically, I don't.
When you say use it for the first child's christening, I assume you don't mean, like, smear it across their forehead like it's the Lion King.
I hope not, but I do quite like the idea of being baptized by cake.
I'm just trying to work out how you would use it, because if it's just one piece of cake, it's not like that's gonna be something you can serve to everyone. Like, do you give the baby the brandy cake? What do you do with the
Oh,
cake?
man, I mean, it'd make the baby sleep, I suppose. Um, I'm not sure at that point. I mean, I don't have any teeth, so at that point, probably would not be able to ingest the cake.
I need to
Hmm.
know what "use the cake for the christening" means.
Anyway, moving on to geese. Um, his section on geese in Dumas' book notes that geese were sacred for a long time in Rome. This was because while the dogs slept, a goose who had remained awake, history does not tell us why, heard the noise made by the ghouls in scaling the Capitol. This goose woke her friends, who all took fright and started screeching so loudly and to such good purpose that they in their turn awoke Cornelius. So, guess geese are heroes now.
That is a
Um,
beautiful and definitely fake story.
yeah, and I noticed this in a lot of Dumas' anecdotes. I think, um, as is perhaps understandable for a writer, he preferred the cool story to the actual historical truth. Um, which I'm not judging. I mean, do I, even when it's important to also say the historical truth.
Mm.
As soon as Julius Caesar had defeated the Gauls, members of the Roman army started to eat geese. So the Romans are betrayers of geese.
I want betrayer of geese on my tombstone.
Oh gosh. So Going on to the next section. Oh, okay. So this is one mentioning the pot-au-feu. It's a type of stew that is famous in France. And in fact, as Dumas says, France, I have already said, is the only country which knows how to make a pot-au-feu. Furthermore, it is probable that my janitress, who has nothing to do but look after her pot-au-feu and unlatch the door, eats better soup than Mr. Rothschild. Very much like.
Who
So,
who is Mr. Rothschild?
the famously really, really rich American oil baron, I think. So this is in the 1870s, which I think is so I think that's the Rothschilds that he's referring to. Yeah. So he's mentioning this in the context of a holiday that he took to the seaside when he stayed with some friends and offered to cook them all dinner. And says that I had everything spread out on the kitchen table and I asked for pen and ink. The approval of my table companions, I presented the following menu, in which there are 4 entrees, 2 roasts, 2 side dishes, a salad, and dessert, which is an extremely French sounding meal.
Yeah.
Now, he then says that he asked for an hour and a half in which to cook this meal. Apparently did it. Did have help, I think. He does mention that there is a cook there, was unanimously demoted, and Dumas was elected in her place. She's free to keep the title of vice cook, but only on condition that she would not oppose the chief cook anyway.
Wow.
Which sounds like a bit of a come down. So I'm
I
just gonna
was
give you
wondering, given dates, whether that would have been served, like, all at once.
oh
Because
no.
the idea of serving courses didn't really take off in France until, like, the mid to late 1800s.
Okay, I would think that it probably would be, or some of it at least would be courses, I think. Um, being the 1870s.
Okay, 1870s, it probably would have been courses,
Yeah.
but it's right on that borderline where there's still a chance.
Yeah, I think probably some of it, like, side dishes and things and main dishes would be together. Um, I think that kind of is still a thing in France as well, to have lots of different dishes on the table, rather than what we tend to do is everything on one plate served at the same time, and then split it up into courses. So I'm just gonna give you one of the dishes from this menu as an example of the kind of things that Dumas enjoyed and would have cooked. Um, so this is called poulet à la sauce normande, which is plaice with a seafood sauce. I'm assuming that means Normandy sauce. So the recipe is the plaice on a silver dish, which must be buttered. Season it with salt, pepper, and a glass of white wine, and put it in the oven. Doesn't say for how long. A piece of butter in a casserole and stir in a little flour until it becomes golden. Moisten this with the butter and white wine from the plaice, leaving behind only enough liquid to ensure that it does not dry up. Reduce by half. Cook about 30 mussels and 10 or 12 mushrooms. The juice from the mussels in the sauce, reduce it all by half, and then bind it with 4 egg yolks and half a glass of fresh cream. Arrange the mussels and mushrooms around the plaice and pour the sauce on top. Put the dish here and there with some little pieces of very fresh butter. The fish sit in the oven for 2 minutes and then serve it.
That
Which,
does sound delicious.
I mean, it does sound delicious. It also sounds like a very fussy dish to make. He doesn't really say anything about timings, so I'm gonna assume that he's assuming whoever's reading it kind of knows how long to cook things for. Which I suppose would be more common knowledge at the time as well.
Probably
Um,
a lot more judging by eye as well,
yeah,
with sort of big open ovens.
yeah. I mean, if all the dishes are like that, though, it must be incredibly hard to try and get them all ready at the same time. It's yeah, it's impressive. Um, I forgot about this. So this is in, one of the recipes about chicken. It says, "All animals have 2 orifices, the upper and the lower. Chicken, in this respect, is the same as man."
Without getting too blue, humans definitely have more than one lower orifice.
Yeah. But it is a good sentence. You have
I'm
to
just
admit.
trying to work out how you would even come to that conclusion.
I think it was a bit of a generalization.
Little bit.
I just like the imagery that that produces.
I'm just seeing him looking in the mirror and going, "Wait, wait."
Maybe holding up a chicken for comparison.
Behold a man.
He does actually mention that. He goes on to mention the, Diogenes holding out a plucked chicken and
Amazing.
shouting, "It is Plato's man." So, there's also a big section on truffles, and I have to say I've never eaten a truffle. It's an ambition one day.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
uh, so truffles are kind of a big thing. I mean, he talks about them as the gastronomes, holy of holies, to the word which gourmands throughout the ages have never pronounced without lifting their hands to their hats. So truffle. And oh man, I'm gonna go on because this is you have questioned scholars asking them exactly what this tubercle is, and after 2,000 years of discussion, the scholars reply as they did on the first day, "We don't know." You have interrogated the truffle itself. The truffle has replied to you, "Eat me and adore God." Recount the history of the truffle would be to take on the task of relating the history of world civilization. That is an introduction. Eat me and adore God. I want that on a t-shirt. So, truffles were said to be an aphrodisiac. Um, and yeah, I mean, we've talked about oysters being that as well. Um, and according to Dumas, it has been said, not by him, but by others, it awakens erotic and gourmand memories in the skirted sex, and gourmand and erotic souvenirs in the bearded sex. The truffle is certainly not a positive aphrodisiac, but in certain circumstances, it can make women more tender and men more amiable. There you go. Truffles, lads.
So it just makes you nice.
Yeah,
It's
just
just
makes
for
you feel a
making
bit
friends.
nice. Um, also, I like that with the skirted sex and the bearded sex. It doesn't specify which is which, so, you know, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean you've got bearded ladies and you've got clean-shaven people in trousers.
Precisely.
It's not of interest to that last group.
Whichever you are, the truffle make you feel nice. So, I mean, truffles, as far as I'm aware, truffles are a kind of fungus, right?
Yeah,
Um, he talks about the most ancient recipe for truffles being attributed to our friend Apicius.
yeah, we've mentioned him before, haven't we?
We have indeed. I think we mentioned him in the form of curry. I think Nick did. Um, and so the recipe for ragu of truffles, Apicius, is first cook your truffles in water, then put them on a skewer and let them turn 5 or 6 times over a fire. Mix them with oil, lemon juice, chervil, which is a herb, pepper, and salt. When the sauce boils, bind it with eggs and wine, which sound quite nice.
I should mention that Nick, being of Italian extraction, looked very excited when you said ragu of truffles.
I know. I mean, all of this is making me want to do a Three Musketeers themed dinner party, which is fancy dress and has Dumas recipes.
Yes, let's do it.
Oh man, let's do it eventually after pandemic.
One
um,
day.
one day. The editor of this book has put in a note that says this recipe does not correspond, except in a very general way, to any of the six given by Epicurus.
And to be fair, Epicurus's recipes are a lot of kind of get these ingredients, make them hot together.
Yeah,
Maybe
I feel
wasn't one for
like
details.
Tamar kind of looked at it and went, this will do. This is it.
I get the idea.
Yeah. So yeah, it then goes up to, I mean, the end of the book is zest, which is a pretty short entry about lemon zests or citrus zests, and the reason you should separate them from the rest of the fruit. Yeah, that's about it. That's sort of, I picked out some of the most interesting and or hilarious bits of the book to read to you, but I definitely would recommend having a look. Like I said, you can just get an abridged version if you don't want to read a massive encyclopedia written in the 1870s, which I wouldn't blame you for. But, definitely
Yeah, I
worth a
feel
look.
like
And
it's gonna be a slog.
yeah, but yeah, definitely worth it. If not just because a lot of the recipes described sound delicious. So I'm really excited to oh, hold on a second. I've just seen frog. Yeah, so, I okay, I've just come across frogs, so I'm just gonna there are many types of frog which differ in size, colour, and habitat. Frogs which live in the sea are monstrous and are not used as a foodstuff. Nor are frogs which live on the land. The only frogs which are good to eat are those which live in the water.
Frogs which live in the sea?
Apparently, there are sea frogs. Yeah.
Is that a real thing?
Um, I don't know, but he's pretty sure of it. So apparently, the English ate toads. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, definitely would recommend having a look at this book or the abridged version if you don't want to slog through the whole thing. If only because a lot of the recipes in it sound delicious and you might want to try them out.
I've
So
tried googling sea frogs and I can only find underwater cameras. I do not know what Dumas was talking about.
maybe it's because they're so monstrous that people just avoid them. Oh gosh, I hope there aren't terrifying frog monsters living in the sea.
According to animals.com, there's no such thing as saltwater frogs
Where are you getting
because
your frog
tadpoles
information?
can't survive in saltwater.
Okay, I have absolutely no idea why Dumas is convinced there are sea frogs.
But you can't eat them anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, don't if you ever see a sea frog, maybe just don't eat it anyway. So I hope you enjoyed learning about Dumas and his love of food.
Do you want to start the wrap up this time? Since you said
Sure.
you hope you enjoyed.
Um, cool. So I hope you enjoyed learning about Dumas and his love of food. That's about all we've got time for. So you can email us at breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com if you've got any suggestions or comments. Have a look at our Twitter, bread and thread on Twitter. for interesting information, things that we are making, and pictures and links that we talk about in the episode.
Yeah, I promise I'm trying to get Hazel to actually use Twitter more, but she does not have Twitter. So it's just remembering to use the bread and thread one.
It's a foreign technology, but I'm getting the hang of it.
You can also support us at patreon.com/breadandthread. We have a patron exclusive Discord server, as well as exclusive recipes and videos. I believe the next video is going to be about your chickens.
It is going to be about general chicken keeping information.
So yeah, you can support us that way, or just by giving us a rating or a review, telling someone that we exist.
So yeah, go forth, be creative, and have a good time.